Hi, everyone, and welcome to journey number 13. And today I'm really excited to have my friend Hafeez Sumani here on the podcast. And Hafeez, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good, Jared. Thank you for having me.
I'm so happy to have you here. And, some people might recognize you from the Black Lives Matter episode, actually,
Mhm.
which we did, I think it was in June, and has been a very
Yeah,
impactful episode. And, you know, not only professionally, but personally, just in my life. It was a really good episode, and I'm so thankful for it. And I've been excited to have you on for a little while now and glad that we could make it work.
yeah, no, it's my pleasure.
So I guess first off, if we could just start with telling everybody a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, what you
Mhm.
work on, everything like that, kind of whatever comes to mind and the story that is you.
Sure, yeah. So I'm Canadian. I grew up in Calgary for about just over 20 years, and I was born in the Middle East. So I was born in Saudi Arabia. So I had quite a diverse upbringing. So my parents are both from Ghana. So I grew up in Saudi Arabia, so an Islamic country. Um, I also went to an Indian school as well too, from first grade to about halfway of third grade before moving to Canada. And yeah, so throughout those experiences, looking back at it, it was it made sense coming to Canada, being exposed to different cultures and immersed in it. So that's been very much part of my life is being exposed to different cultures, and with that sense of curiosity and openness to learning and connecting with people and accepting different cultures and values. So that's been something that has been very much with me since at a young age. And
It's
what
very
else?
just to
Mhm,
interrupt. I'm curious because
mhm,
from the very moment that I met you, I could just feel it coming off of you. But being a very spiritual person, and
mm,
you're into a lot of call them like the Eastern practices as I've gotten to know you more, and things like qigong and
mm.
just those philosophies. Is is that something that you developed at a young age, being exposed to those different cultures, or is that more something that you've leaned into later in your life?
It was more so. It wasn't until it was a catalyst. It was something that occurred in my life that um, caused me to start searching. That I got into more of the Eastern philosophy, and I got into qigong and the mindfulness practices for sure. Um, yeah, it definitely was. From an early age, I was very much a devout Muslim. Like it's very much part of who I am. The values, and so that was what I was surrounded with, and in Saudi Arabia. My dad went to university in Saudi, and then he got a job as a petroleum engineer. And then my mom in Ghana, so she came to Saudi, and both me and my sister were born there. So that was very much what I knew was being involved. And like imagine like you're at the store, you're at the restaurant, and then it's time to pray. So like everybody shuts everything down, like they shut the stores. And I even have one memory of being in a amusement park. Actually, like I got on the ride, and then they called the prayers, and then they had to shut everything down. I remember being upset because I was like, I want to go on this ride, but nope, I gotta wait for like 15 minutes or so before 15, 20 minutes before everybody is done praying. So that was normal. That was part of it because everybody was doing it. And it wasn't until I came to Canada that there was such a distinct difference. I really felt that difference. And that was I was 8 years old when I came to Canada. So it was a very pivotal moment because at that age, right, like that's when a lot of our sense of reasoning starts to develop, right? So it was interesting being here in Canada at 7, 8, and then with what I learned there, and then like carrying that off. So yeah.
It's so interesting, and you telling that story, which I love, and it's such an interesting story, especially as somebody who grew up in Canada and didn't really leave Canada until I was a little bit older, and didn't leave North America until last year, right? Where when I
Mhm.
went to Dubai and I spent a month there,
Ah.
and I went there during Ramadan, right? And it was so
Mm.
interesting for me, and it was even though it had become called, like more westernized, where there were still restaurants that were open during the day and everything like that. I was around people that were, um, excuse me, practicing Ramadan and, fasting during the day. And the whole like city almost shifts. And even for the restaurants and cafes that are open during the day, they actually black out all of the windows so that people going looking in can't see in. And it's actually like considered rude to like be walking around with food, and luckily just rude now. Before they were very very strict about it, but when I was there it's just like, no, like, if you're gonna be respectful when you're there, and I totally understood. But it was so cool to see, just a different way of living.
Hmm. Oh yeah. I think like even just like traveling to different places, you really get to see different, you know, like how people live in different parts of the world, and you get to learn about it, and in contrast to how you're living as well. And I really felt that difference too, because in 2008, my parents, my whole family, so I have a brother and a sister, right? So they all moved back to Saudi Arabia in 2008. At that time, I was already in university. I was in my second year of university, and at that time, I was very much into my track career then. Um, and when I went back to visit in the summertime, I was it was like a culture shock for me. I'm like, oh my gosh, like I grew up here. Like how did I function? So my parents, they live within a compound. So within the compound, it's westernized. So my mom can drive. She doesn't have to cover her hair and her wear a hijab. So everything there is westernized within that gated community. Once you leave that community, it's a whole that's really where the world is, right? It's this bubble. Once you get out of it, you got to cover up. My mom has to cover up. My sister has to cover up. Women can't drive, and that's changed now. That's changed now, finally. But yeah, it's such a different world. In fact, I remember it was like 40 degrees, 45 degrees or something like that. It was incredibly hot, and
Right.
I was wearing this big bright t-shirt, like a bright green t-shirt and like shorts, and I was like dying. It was so hot. Um, and I was waiting outside for my mom. She was at a jewelry store. There's a lot of jewelry stores in the Middle East. For every three stores, there's a jewelry store. And there's this guy that comes up to me, and he starts speaking in Arabic. And I don't really speak Arabic very well. I understand like the verses, the Quran verses when I'm praying, but in terms of conversational, I didn't understand. And he was just doing this, and I didn't know what he was saying, and I just kind of just moved away, being like, I don't know what you're saying. And then he calls the police, and the police comes up to me, and then they start like heckling me in Arabic. I'm like, oh my gosh, what's happening? Like, are they accusing me of stealing? Because they have strict rules. Like, if you're caught stealing, they'll chop a finger. Like things like that is no joke. So my mom comes, and she understands a bit of Arabic, and basically they asked for my ID, right? And my ID, it shows that, oh, I'm Canadian, and they're like, oh, Canada, okay. And then they're like, oh, you can, because I was wearing like a piece of jewelry, like a Buddha head statue, and that was un-Islamic. It's like, nope, you're not allowed to wear that. You got to take that off. So that's what they were heckling me with, and they're like, in Canada you can rock that, but here you got to take this off. So I just took it off. I'm like, yep,
Yeah.
no, no, because if I didn't have my ID, they would have detained me till
Yeah.
I proved who I was, right? And so I'm like, yo, this is so anytime I leave the compound, I'm wearing like I get the whole attire, like the white robe, and it's called a taupe. I just rock that, and like a turban, so I can blend in. So that was a big lesson for me, in terms of just how grateful, I'm grateful we are to live in Canada. I could wear whatever I want, express myself without anyone harassing me, and that was yeah. So you
That's
really learn when you travel to different places. Really
Yeah, it's
appreciate
such a
Canada.
crazy story, and it seems so foreign to, like, someone like me, and at the same time, I kind of understand it too, right? And I don't know, I always have that view of like being respectful when you're in somebody else's place, whether that's, their home or their country or whatever it might be, but being respectful, right?
Hmm.
Um, Now I'm curious, like, so moving to Canada, how much do you remember when you were younger there? And was it a big, obviously, big culture shock, big changes? How difficult did you find it though? Like, was the transition difficult? Like, for school when you were young and just like life in general, or
Mhm.
were you young enough to kind of just go with the flow and kind of just go on with your life?
Yeah, no, it was an adjustment for me for sure. I was a very quiet, shy kid. Um, yeah, I wasn't I wasn't always like that. I was very energetic. I had a very hyper kid. I have a lot of energy. I'm bouncing off walls. Um, and of course, my parents were very strict with me. So I learned quickly to be well behaved. Being well behaved means I'm a good son. So I really embodied that. And with that, I became really shy, really introverted. I wouldn't speak unless someone spoke to me, kind of thing. Um, so in the, when I was in the from grade 1 to grade 3, and when I was in that school, the Indian school, it was very strict, absolutely strict. Like in terms of like homework, if you didn't do homework, like teachers would they would smack you across the face. They would humiliate you. They would shame you. So there was a lot of fear base, right? So like I better do my homework before I get humiliated, kind of thing. And also I didn't speak Hindi or Urdu. I didn't really. It was weird. I'm like, I don't belong here. What am I doing here? But it was the best school my parents could afford to put me in at that time. Looking back now, right? And I was picked on. I was bullied. And because I didn't. It wasn't because of my skin color, but because I just didn't fit in culturally, and so it was always like 10 against 1, kids trying to chase me and beat me up. So I learned to, I just was fast, right? And that's where I discovered that, hey, I have athletic abilities. I can run fast. There was a sports day and there was a track and different events, and I did the 100-meter dash, and I won my race by a huge margin. And these kids that were picking on me and bullying me were suddenly like, it flipped. They became my friend. When it was recess, all the boys would line up to race me one at a time, and it was like this instant, like, yeah, you're one of us. You're awesome, like this celebrity kind of thing, and that impact affected me many years, right? And we can get into that. So that was in third grade, and then coming to Canada, I didn't like. I was excited to see snow. That was the one thing I was like, I can't wait to see snow. But yeah, I was very shy. I have this memory of this was in third. Yeah, this was third grade. Um, in Calgary, and they would alternate gym class. Like I love gym class. That was what, like, I had so much energy, and that was where I expressed myself, as just from running and playing sports. And then there was music class. And I hated music class because I had to sit still, and the kids were singing. We had to like sing songs. I had no idea of any of these songs at all. Like no clue. I didn't know any of the Christmas carols, anything like that. I'm not like, it's completely foreign to me. So I'm just sitting there looking around, daydreaming, and then the teacher calls me out. He's like, "Hey, pay attention." And that moment there, I hated music class. I want nothing to do with music. I was like, I am not doing this anymore. I hate music. I don't want nothing to do with music, just from that experience. And now I look back, I'm like, I do. I wish I could play an instrument, and I'm trying to get back into that now. But that was the reason, that was the block, because of that. Because, I didn't have that. I didn't feel welcomed in that group. And, the teacher wasn't, I don't know, I guess he didn't have that awareness enough to be like, hey, this is a kid that came from the Middle East. He has no idea what's going on. Let me just ease him through. Or, it was just like, here you go, ease it, figure it out, kind of thing. Right. And it's like, yeah, so I adjusted though. I eventually adjusted and got into sports. Sports was my biggest mask, so to speak.
Yeah.
It saved me. I played basketball. I did, track and field. That was what was that's what built the, I guess, that the gap between me connecting, that like pulled me in. So
Yeah, it's so funny what those seemingly insignificant moments, especially like in our childhood, can shape so much of who we are for years and years, in the future. And just by
mm.
that one teacher calling you out the one time, it was like, okay, I now officially hate music.
Right.
And, but I get it. You know, One of the other things I was curious about too, I've kind of touched on this a couple of times in other episodes, but like I was bullied pretty badly when I was a kid as well, right?
Mm.
And um, I was talking about it earlier today, where it's like, not just the bullying, but a lot of things from my childhood, and I was just like, oh, I'm fine. Like they don't affect me now. Like I made my peace with them. Like whatever. And then as I started digging into it, I was like, oh, you know what? Actually, like that did have a lasting effect on me. And just kind of bringing it to light, and one of the biggest ones that I realized it was that's where I was taught that, not like taught by somebody, but subconsciously, I had decided that if people like you, they will be mean to you, right? And that
Mm.
transferred into my entire life. Whereas, like, okay, in any sort of relationship, friendship, whatever it was, I would always subconsciously think that, like, if this person cares about me, then they're going to treat me badly. Right. And I'd almost be looking for that. And it wasn't until that moment where I was like, oh, now they actually, I know that they care about me because they've treated me like shit. Right.
Mm.
Um, and now just look, and it would feel weird when there wasn't that element. Like if they were just nice to me or they actually truly cared about me all the time, it's like, this is weird. Like this doesn't feel right. And I didn't realize that that was kind of the processing that was going on, and the story that I told about myself to myself.
Yeah.
And so I'm just curious, looking back on your experiences with that, have you been able to pull any lessons for yourself, from your experiences when you were younger and like getting bullied and stuff like that, or something that you haven't dug into too much yet?
Um, Looking back at that from the experience of that, like going through like being bullied, I learned quickly after, especially after that event, that 100-meter event, and just how quickly I was accepted, that I latched onto that, right? I latched onto that. This is what I got to do. This is what will make me fit in more. This is what will make me, popular or accepted. Um, I was what, 6 or 7 years old at the time, and that carried over. That carried over very much into junior high, high school, especially high school, um, where I made sure I played basketball. Um, and that was something that was pushed onto me as well too, being like, "Hey, you play basketball? You're tall for, you're tall, black. You must play basketball." I'm like, "I actually don't play basketball. I don't. I love watching basketball. I love Michael Jordan is one of my favorite sports idols, along with Muhammad Ali. But I made a conscious decision. I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna try this. I'm gonna play basketball, and just get into it. And um, yeah, like it was I was doing these things to fit in, for to be connected, right? And looking back at that, I was living a life according to other people's expectations, right? I spent so much time trying to get other people to like me that I didn't know myself. And that's really what the, when I feel it now, that's really where the pain is that I don't know, who are you? Like, who am I? I didn't give myself that chance till much later, right? Where all these Eastern philosophies and meditation and introspection comes in to be like, whoa, I lost myself through all this, and I need to find myself, and
Yeah.
that's the journey. Sometimes you got to lose yourself to find yourself, right?
Yeah, and that resonates a ton. And it's so funny, so many parallels with the conversation I had earlier today, where,
Mm,
I was explaining that too, of like, because in my life, right, like for me, it was I had to be perfect to be worthy of love, right? Now
mm,
that I've
mhm.
looked back on it, that's kind of, where a lot of those things came from. And
Yeah,
so that meant I had to become the person that they wanted me to be so that they would like me,
yeah,
right? And after doing that for years and years and years, and it was essentially like, okay, I'm going to be quiet at first, right? I'm going to be quiet. I'm going to like, kind of feel them out, like not go to any which way, feel them out, see what they like, see what they don't like, see,
mhm,
the type of personality that they have, the interests, whatever it might be. And then do a couple of trial little things so that I can see, what kind of person they want me to be so that then they'll like me,
yeah,
and having no idea on who I actually was. Like, if I wasn't
yeah,
trying to get somebody to like me, who would I even be? And
yeah,
I didn't have an answer for that. And so that resonates a ton of just like not knowing who I actually was.
Yeah. And
And, like just knowing a little bit about your story, and, we've kind of touched on it a couple times here, is that idea of the athletic mask,
mhm,
right? And, there's all different kinds of masks that a lot of us wear to fit in,
yeah.
right? Whether it's the athletic mask or the comedian or joker mask or whatever it might be,
Mhm.
right? But changing ourselves and almost putting on that suit of armor and becoming someone else, playing a character, for the approval of other people.
Yeah.
And because you're actually, like, quite a successful athlete. And so, can you just go into that a little bit, if you don't mind, of,
Sure. Yeah.
kind of your experiences with it, everything.
Yeah. And as you're talking about the mask and all these things, like I was just thinking about, like, as we have these masks on, there's this sort of buffer that we put on with this mask that is to shield us from being vulnerable. And one thing that I recently discovered, because this is constant work, is that there's this level of anxiety, like trying to understand someone and connect with someone, and like, I'm gonna just feel them out, and that sort of thing. I do that too, and but doing that, there's a slight level of anxiety with it. Like, it may not be like from a scale of 0 to 10, 10 being like panic attack, 0 being like really zen, right? For me, it was like a slight, maybe it was like a 2 or a 3, and it was like, yeah, it is not, it doesn't bother me, but it's slightly there. And it's this perpetuating level of anxiety, that we don't face. And then it stays in our body till it accumulates. Then we're like, okay, now I got to deal with this, So it's fascinating, when it comes to these things. Um, so going back to track. Yeah, so I took track seriously. I really took it seriously in 10th grade. Um, it was like a full-time job for me. It was like 5, 6 days a week. And I had a great coach that had that mindset that I was looking for, of like, you go hard to the wall, you show, like, you got to be tough, and you got to be dedicated, you got to have that grit. Um, and that served me. I started out as a 100-meter sprinter before I moved to the 2 and the 400. I was 400 meters. I was very hesitant about doing that event. It's the whole lap of the track, right? And it's not a full sprint, but you're going pretty hard. And no matter, and it was such a mental game, because no matter if I go slow, it's still gonna hurt. If I go fast, it's still gonna hurt, right? So it really is a mental game, and it's grit. So I learned a lot of, like, just being tough and tough in my nervous system. And as an athlete, you become really aware of your body, like being aware of, like, okay, like, do I feel good? How's my body? How's my ankles? How's my hamstrings? Right? Just make sure before you get like a tweak or a pull or anything like that, because if you get a hamstring tweak, then that's like 2 weeks out of your training, right? So it's always this sense of really being acutely aware of your body. And with achievement as well too. So I was, in terms of provincial, like in Alberta, like I constantly ranked, even nationally, I ranked top 10 for several years. Um, and it was never good enough. I was chasing this, like, I gotta make the Olympics. That is the ultimate dream. If I make the Olympics, everybody will respect me. I'll get money and all these accolades, right? So I was chasing that, and I sacrificed my body, right? I was like, I'm gonna push through. I don't care, if whatever happens to my body, I'm gonna make it. And then that's part of the sacrifice. As an athlete, you gotta be like, the stuff you put through your body, no pain, no gain kind of thing. That was very much what I had to learn, right? And I paid for it. I had a lot of injuries, a lot of setbacks, and from that, I learned a lot about myself. I had a lot of tenacity. Um, in university, there was, it's not called CIs anymore, but it's like nationals, basically university nationals. And 2 years in a row, I ended up getting injured. I'd run the preliminaries, relays or my own event, and I get hurt, and I can't run the finals 2 years in a row. And I'd always have these obstacles where I'd be so close, I'd be gaining momentum, and then something would happen where I had to sit out for the season or take time to recover. And I just had so much resentment within myself, like, no, I gotta keep pushing harder and harder and whatever I can do. Um, and looking back at all of that now, I was not present. I was not present at all. I was focused on the future. I was like, this is what I gotta do. Uh, Before a race, I would have like, my jam. I'd listen to like DMX and hardcore, hardcore hip hop, Eminem, Lose Yourself. Like I would like literally like skip my heartbeat to get the heart pumping um, throughout the warm up, and that was my routine. And it wasn't until the gun goes off that I'll be like, oh, okay, I'm here. Now I got to execute. All that nerves, jitters, and everything would go away. And I look back at that, I was like, oh, if I was just so relaxed and just more chill and just detached from the outcome, and it's only when you look back that you can connect the dots and be like, like it doesn't, it's this sort of um, level of being like, even as a sprinter as well too, like it's the most aggressive thing. Like you're going like hard and you're it's power, but you also relax at the same time. Your jaws relax, your shoulders are relaxed. So that's what it's like. It's like being even with performance as well too. It's like I want to achieve, I want to strive for excellence, but at the same time, if I don't make it, that's okay. I'm okay with that. So I was not okay with that. If I even if I ran a PB, a personal best, I'll still be like, that wasn't good enough. Or I stumbled, or I did this. I could have run faster. I never celebrated the little victories. And it was never enough. And that was torturous for me. And I just like, nope, make the Olympics. That's when we'll celebrate, instead of enjoying the journey.
Yeah, and it's such a difficult thing too, because a lot of times conversations or even stories like that, right, can kind of be taken as like, oh, athletics are bad, right, or like putting on the athletic mask is, like it automatically happens whenever you go into athletics. And it's such a tough balance between how can I healthily engage in this? Because, for me playing football, there were a lot of things that it helped me overcome too.
Mhm.
Right. And like sometimes it was good for me to be broken down and, like forced to kind of persevere to show me what I'm capable of. Right. And like to show me that I'm able to push through it, to show me that what I'm actually capable of doing, that,
Yep.
like that I have strength, that, like, um, that I'm good at this, whatever it might be. And, one of the things that stood out the most for me was when you're talking about why you were doing it back then, right? And it was a lot of external things.
Mhm.
As, if
Yep.
I achieve this, people will think this way about me. If I do this, like they were all external coming in, right? And it's such a fine balance too, because a lot of times, we perform our best under pressure.
Mhm.
And it's how do you put yourself under pressure to make sure that you perform, and at the same time it's like a good healthy pressure if you want to, right? Because I think a big thing is that like some people, like I'm super competitive, I love sports, I want to win every single thing,
Mhm.
um, and being okay with accepting that piece of me and trying to let go of the piece of me that says like, but if you lose then you are not worthy,
Yeah,
right?
that's the
And
key
so
there.
it's
Mhm.
such a fine balance of trying to just work all that out in your brain, and especially when we're younger, when we're doing it to try to prove something, it's
Mhm.
it's so tough.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah,
It's like when it comes to growth, right? You need to break down for you to grow. Like it's like lifting weights, right? Like you get sore, like that's the good type of sore, right? So that the micro tears of the muscles, so that it'll build back stronger, right? So I think in terms of that, like it's not it's useful, right? It's the narrative around that causes the damage, right? So it's not so much the failure, so to speak. It's more so your judgment around that causes the harm. So
yeah,
we do it to ourselves. The narratives around that, oh, I'm not good enough, oh, I'm not this, and then you play that track over and over again, that your body starts to be like, oh, okay, I guess we're not good enough. And you right, so it shows up in our body.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think another big piece of it is that it seems like when you're kind of in that zone, when you're doing it for validation, when you're doing it for external factors, a lot of times when you achieve that, it
Hmm.
doesn't actually feel any better than you thought. Like you don't feel any better than you did before, right?
Yeah.
Like that achievement, it actually doesn't fulfill you like you thought it was going to, right? And
Hmm.
yeah, like I don't. Do you have any stories of that? Whereas like you finally actually achieved the thing that you wanted to, and then you looked around and you're like, well, I still feel like now it's not enough. I still feel like now I have to go do something, or just like
Oh
more of
yeah.
an empty feeling.
Yeah, like even like university even, right? Like I honestly, like when I went to university, I wanted to um at first I wanted to go into kinesiology because I cared. That's all I wanted was sports. That was my world. I want to be involved in that and immersed in it. And but I also like business as well too. I learned from my dad at a young age. He was very much into different businesses. My mom too was also an entrepreneur as well. She had her own daycare. We owned some vending machines as well too. So I also had that business mindset as well too. So they planted some seeds in that. So I looked at that as well too, of like, maybe I should take business. And I didn't have the grades at all. I didn't have the grades to get into business, and I had to take calculus. And oh my gosh, that was math was not my strongest subject at all.
Yeah,
So I had to overcome a lot of that. And I I did economics for a while, and then I was switching around majors before I got into business. Um, but looking back at that, I didn't, like it's such a big accomplishment for me because I didn't believe that I could get into business because I didn't have the grades, right? But I did. I worked hard, and I had to take some time off from school, from training, to take some courses and get in, and then I graduated with that degree, and I was like, oh my gosh, like there was this sense of like anticipation to finishing my degree. Oh my gosh, once I finish this, then like now my life can begin and I can get this job and all this sort of stuff. So this level of accomplishment, I felt it, but it was like, okay, well, now what? And that was another sense of dread. And it tied in with athletics as well, too. Right. 2012. It was the Olympic trials in Calgary, and I was graduating university, and I didn't really have a plan. And I was like, well, what am I gonna do next? What am I gonna do? And I applied to jobs and all these things, and it was cold. It was cold. Like it wasn't. I had this sense of I had this perception that, oh, because I have a business degree, Huskisson School of Business, I can get a job. I can apply and then I'll get a job. I was like, it took me a good almost a year before I
yeah,
could get a full job, and it was yeah. And that was part of the adjustment and accepting the reality of how things are.
yeah,
That was a tough transition. Yeah.
yeah. It's always yeah, the reality when the reality sets in that it wasn't exactly like you were hoping it was going to be
Yeah,
or how you had imagined it in your brain, right? No, I totally get that.
exactly. Hmm.
Switching things up a little bit, and I wanted to touch on some of those Eastern practices and philosophies that um,
Hmm.
that you got into, and
Right.
kind of how you found them and how they've helped you, and like the specifics, like which ones. Like I know you brought up meditation, and we've talked about qigong and stuff like that.
Hmm.
Yeah, so how did you get into them? Like what first drew them to you, and like which ones specifically have helped you and how?
What got me into this was, so at the time when I was in this, when I finished university and Olympic trials, and I didn't make it, and I was in this, I wasn't depressed, but I was in a low state, and I was just stuck in it, and I just got, I saw not a teacher, I saw a doctor, because I was happy and sad, and then I got into this thought that, oh, maybe I'm like bipolar or some sort of mental disorder or something like that. And then I went in and I got pre-diagnosed that, oh, ADD. So, we could try taking some happy pills, and then we can move on from different prescriptions. And it didn't sit right with me. It didn't make any sense because I was I graduated university. I was a B student. I trained 5 6 days a week, and I was managing property, and I was working part-time. There's so many things that I was doing. I had good time management, and I like, I can focus if I want to. Like I don't need this. So that was something within me was like, no, there's got to be another way. And I remember, like, I watch a lot of YouTube videos on motivational, even before podcasts. um, this is like before Spotify actually, but there was one video with Will Smith. Like I love his stuff, and there's one he did this music awards, Nickelodeon awards. He talked about the two keys to life, reading and running. And it's like running because you got to keep moving even if you're feeling sore, you got to keep moving. I'm like, yep, I got that. I'm a runner, so I got that. The reading part, I hate reading. I'm not a big reader at all. I read like books with pictures, comic books,
Yeah.
like I'm a visual person. I don't want to read like a thick but he said that there's so many problems. We have like all these problems out in the world that we think our problem is unique. Like, no, people can relate to that, and they've talked about it in different books. You can find answers. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna find some books. Well, what do I want right now? I want to be happy. Okay, well, let's go to chapters and see what books we can find on happiness. And that's what I did. I just had this burst of curiosity, and I just grabbed some books on happiness. One of them was like the happiness equation. Another one was Flourish, and that one was a game changer for me. Dr. Martin Seligman, he's like a pioneer of positive psychology. Way of the Peaceful Warrior by Dan Millman. That one literally snapped me out of my low state. It's a fictional, yeah, semi-fictional story about an athlete, gymnast going through his challenges, and he meets a mentor that's very philosophical. So those were catalysts for me. It was literally just reading books and expanding my mind. Like, whoa, there's so much more out there. I was in this little tunnel. I was in this bubble where I'm like, this is what I need to do. Like, there's so much more out there, and expanded my curiosity. I was like, okay, well, this is what happiness is. Okay, cool. I'm satisfied with that. Okay, well, what else? What about all these leaders? Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Nelson Mandela, Mahatma Gandhi. What made them all so great? Why do we idolize these people? So I was reading these books. I was reading so much. I read so much in a span of like three to 4 months than I did in like my whole university. I was like, textbooks you just scan and just kind of. I was really good at memorizing stuff, but I was on a mission, and that's how that started.
Very
Just
cool.
from reading and connecting with people that were doing interesting things.
Mm.
A friend of mine, um, he told me about it's like a retreat, like a summit. It's called Higher Purpose, and that was in Colorado. And yeah, I that was also a game changer for me because I was surrounded by a lot of entrepreneurs, people that are doing cool things. Like there's one guy that was a filmmaker. He climbed Mount Everest and he filmed documentaries about it. One person was like a coder for Assassin's Creed. All these. One person, Preston Smiles, big name, like a uh, inspirational coach. And so there's a lot of these people that I was around for like 3 days, and that was really what got me. That's really what shifted for me, because being around that, the fastest way to change is to surround yourself with people that you want to be around. And I didn't know I needed to be around these people. I just felt drawn to being here, and then it opened gates for me. I was like, Reiki, what's Reiki? Yoga, like yoga. I was doing yoga when I was an athlete to help me with injuries, but the spiritual side, I didn't. I just wanted just to be efficient and healthy. That's all. um so yeah, that's how that started. It just started out with like healing myself physically, wanting to be healed physically so I could start training again. I didn't want to give up on my dream. I was like, well, 2012 didn't work. Well, what about 2016?
Yeah.
Let's get back on that, right? So I had that determination still. And yeah, that's how that started.
No, it's so interesting, and something that, well, a quote that stuck out so much for me recently is, like you're the average of the five closest people to you in
Hmm.
your life, right? And
Yep.
just taking that idea and kind of expanding on it, and just being very deliberate on trying to, bring people around me that, push me to be better, right?
Yep.
Push me to be better, support me in whatever it might be. And so, I think that's such a key piece, is finding those people and surrounding yourself with those people, and just even showing you what's possible, or just alternatives, right?
Oh yeah, totally. It's
Yeah,
it's the fastest way. It's the fastest way to change, to grow.
exactly. Yeah, and
Mhm.
where we kind of, our relationship really not necessarily started, but where it really became what it is today is, we're both in the same men's group.
Yeah.
And, I've talked about it on here before. And, I was just curious for you, like what pushed you to one, like join the men's group? And, I mean, we've touched on it a little bit, but
Mhm.
already, but, what pushed you to want to work on your mental health in that specific container? Um, and what were your goals going in, and are they different now, and what do you take out of it?
And it's interesting when it came to men's to the men's group. So I was involved. I'm still involved with King of Hearts, right? Started by Andy and Nuke, who you've interviewed in previous episodes. Um, so being involved in that, that was a slow process for me because I've always had this lone wolf mentality. I got to do everything on my own, and I got to be right from since I was 19. My parents moved to the Middle East, so I was alone here, so I had to take care of myself and make sure that I'm good. Of course my family was supporting me, but I had to get used to that, and that was my world, right? That I got to make sure that I'm good. And there's this quote, I'm sure you know about it, like if you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go further, you go together. Right. So um that was that was what drove me to be curious about the men's circle. Andy talked about it, Andy and Dea. Um they did a men's circle, men's retreat, and they changed. Literally, I could see it in their eyes and their voice when they speak about it, and just how inspired they were. I'm like, you know what? Like, I'm curious about this. I want to know what more about this. So curiosity was what really brought me there. In terms of goals, it was just a sense of like, I'm just open to this and see what happens, kind of thing. That was my approach to it. It wasn't like, okay, I need to do this and do that. I was like, no, like I'm just curious and open to see what I'll learn from this. And yeah, it was it's been about a year since I've been involved in the men's circle in particular. And just from other men sharing their experiences, I learned that my own problems, going back to that Will Smith reference with problems, my problems are not unique. Like everybody's going through something, right? Somebody's feeling something and they're sharing that, and there's something in there that I can relate to, that triggers something in my memory or my what I feel, that allows me to there's a sense of camaraderie, right? That comes from that. And it's yeah, to describe the feeling of that, it's a sense of being seen and being part of something bigger than yourself.
Yeah.
And as human beings, we're wired to be connected. And that's been invaluable. I can't put a price on that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was so huge, right? And my work in that really did start with King of Hearts as well, but it was
Hmm.
realizing that I'm not alone in a lot of these problems, just like you said, right?
Yep.
Where a lot of times for the longest time in my life, I felt alone, right? And it was because of that, holding a lot of shame around things, of like, well, I'm the only one that struggled with this, and so I shouldn't be struggling with it, and getting down on myself and kind of going down that spiral, right? And
Hmm.
so hearing other people's stories, hearing what other people have been through, hearing the things that people struggle with, it's like, oh, I'm not alone. Actually, there's a lot of people that struggle with things like this. And,
Yeah.
I always go back when I explain it to people, because it's such a hard thing to explain. And I'm like, truly what it comes down to for me is it was a place to be seen and heard without fear of judgment.
Hmm.
Right. And it allowed me to truly open up to a bunch of, people that about things that I'd never opened up about, that I thought I was going to take to the grave, like, like never sharing with anybody. And so,
Yep.
yeah, that it was immensely helpful for me in both of those ways.
Hmm. Yeah. It's a safe space,
Yeah.
right? It's a safe space to share parts of yourself that exactly that you wouldn't otherwise share outside of that.
Yeah.
And And by doing this, you're also you're healing yourself. Our body's like a storage. It's like a hard drive storage that stores memories. It remembers everything. All the little, like, even like there's the deep traumas as well too. But there's also the little bits of, oh, I'm uncomfortable or something, and it shows up in your body. You stiffen up, and
Yeah.
like those little things, it adds up, right? And by recognizing it, and being seen that, oh, I'm feeling nervous, just by acknowledging it, you feel like, oh yeah, I acknowledge it. Okay, now I can relax now,
Yeah.
right? It's kind of like that. It's just being seen. That's all that it is. It's not even to have the problem solved. It's not like, hey, this is my problem, how do I solve that? It's like, this is what it is, and just to be seen, right? And that's the first stage of healing, is to be seen and to be heard, right? It's a space. It's you can call it like, like the feminine energy, like the nurturing mother type of energy, right? And then after that, then there's the masculine, like, okay, like, this is what happened, this is what you could have done next time, that sort of thing, right? So and you can ask for that, right? It's a space where you can ask, this is what I need, like, I need, different perspectives here, and that sort of thing. So it's empowering as well too. You speak up, and you're the one that is asking for it, and in the driver's seat, so to speak. So it's
Yeah. It's interesting when you're saying that too, because one of the things that it really helped me step into was actually like more of the masculine energy, call it, of like speaking my truth or being direct with somebody, right? And
yep.
learning how to do that. And it was a really cool container to kind of, play, to be honest, right? Of just like I can't tell somebody that like it'll crush them, or like it'll seem like I'm just being a dick, or like whatever it might be, right? But it's like, no, sometimes like you need to speak your truth. Sometimes you need to, call somebody out on something, and learning how to do that in still a loving way, but a very direct and pointed, statement
Mhm.
or action or whatever it might be, and stepping into that has always also been, really
Absolutely.
empowering and has led to tons of growth for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And it's exactly that. Like, it's the best way to cultivate your masculine energy, is to be around other men. Right. There's
Yeah.
something about being around other men where, like, even a dynamic of, like, like, I'm sure we've all experienced this, right? Like, as guys, right? Like, there's a group of guys, and then there's a girl that's it changes the dynamics of everything.
Yeah.
It changes everything. It's like, oh, I'm gonna filter what I'm gonna say. I'm gonna be, like, all it's this sort of at least for me, that's how that shows up, but when you're around other men, it's like, yeah, like, there's no level of demand, I would say, where I gotta, like, you can just relax into yourself, right? There's something about that, no
Yeah.
no demand. Essentially, what that's the essence of masculine energy, is being in a space where it's almost like, I want to say nothingness, but it's like no demand,
Yeah.
where you're just seen. I don't want nothing from you. I see you. Your presence is what matters. That's what it is, right? So that container. So
Yeah.
we need more of that. We need, yeah,
Yeah.
so.
And I really like bouncing back and forth, because, I don't necessarily think that one is necessarily better or worse than the other, right? Of like, call it like a, all male group, or an all, or a mixed group, or whatever it might be, right? Or even an all female group, right? It's
Mhm.
like, it's just people act differently in all
Yeah,
three
yeah,
settings, right? And
that's
it's
true.
just like, and that's actually one of the reasons why I love bouncing back and forth between King of Hearts and, the men's group, because it's like, you see different perspectives, you show up differently, and you explore different things too, right?
Mhm.
And so, going back and forth between them, I think a lot of times, especially for me, just speaking for myself, is it was never having an environment of just men like that, right? Where it's not just like trying to one up each other, where it's not just like where I can be vulnerable around that. It's
Yeah.
yeah, it was just so different, right? And so freeing. And
Mhm.
so I think that's one of the reasons why it means so much to me.
Yeah, exactly. It's there's intention around it. It's purposeful, and it's meant to grow you. It's not necessarily like, hey, we just hang out and talk about girls and sports, and
Yeah.
the fluffy stuff, right? It's like getting deep to the core of who you are. Like, who are you, and what is your truth right now? And this is a space where you can share that, and we can help you if you wish, right? For the sake of your, expressing your truth, right? Because
Yeah,
that's what we're here for, to express our gift to the world, right? So,
exactly. Yeah.
hmm.
Um, we are winding up here. Time has just flown by. It's crazy,
It
but
is. I feel
uh,
like we're still digging more into the things here. Yeah.
but I want to ask you this question. I ask basically everyone who comes on it, and it's, what does the next phase of your journey look like?
The next phase of my journey look like? So this season for me, it's a lot of building. So I'm accepting my dharma, so to speak, my purpose, and that is to teach. I come from a family of teachers, and I swore that I'll never be a teacher, but here I am, finding myself in a position where what I have to offer is needed and welcomed, right? And so that's what I'm doing right now. Is I'm creating programs, courses on mindfulness, um, balancing bringing your head into your heart, balancing that. Uh, I'm also uh, I'm also creating a program on marketing as well too, right? So I'm building all these structures to serve. So that's my season right now. So
Very cool.
yeah.
Is there anything that we didn't get to that you wanted to touch on, or
Oh, there's a lot. There's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff to dig in there. Um, like in terms of like we were talking about connecting, trying to get people to like us, and like that side. um yeah, I did some work on that, and um but we can dive into that as well too. Like there's levels of for me, it was like codependency tendencies that I found within myself that were tied to my childhood, that I was unaware of, that I was just expressing unconsciously, right? So, um, yeah, I'd love to talk more about that, because that's something that, and even with trauma as well too. Like a lot of the healing stuff, it ties back to our childhood, right? So being a friend to your child, not to your child, to your inner child, right? The younger version of yourself. Be your own. Look out for your younger self, going back in that state, and as an adult, right? Because when we experience trauma, we don't have the brain power to process things and understand things, right? We're still developing, but we don't know how to handle it, so it stays in our body. So now that we are, so a lot of this work is healing work, so to speak, is going back into ourselves and be like, oh, this is what this happened, and then looking at your beliefs around it, looking at your beliefs, and debunking those beliefs, reframing those beliefs to new truths, right? So what you say and how you think is what dictates your reality, right? So from the inner to the outer.
yeah,
So
yeah,
that's a little snippet there.
that's a big topic, and we might have to get you back on to talk about it more in depth. But I resonate a ton with it, and it's, for me, it was going back and challenging those beliefs that I had and seeing what's true. Right?
Hmm.
It's like, okay, is this actually a truth, and or did I decide it? And if I decided it, do I still believe it?
Hmm.
Right? And then
Yep.
digging into that of like, okay, now what is the story that I'm just telling about myself to myself? And what did I decide was a truth? Like, again, going back to the bullying thing of, if people care about me, they'll treat me poorly. Right? And that's how people teach you that they care about you. Right? And going back and looking at those and identifying them and working through them. And yes, there's definitely a bunch there that I would love to dig into with you. So
Yeah.
um, but yeah, I think for unfortunately for today, I think that's we're up. But where can people find you? Where's the best place for people to find you to connect with you?
Yeah. The best place is on Instagram.
Okay,
So Hafeez_alchemist. You can find me on there. I have several other Instagram accounts as well too, Urban Lightworker as well too. So yeah, you can send me a message, and if you need any advice or anything like that, reach out. Yeah.
awesome. I'll put those in the notes too, so people can
Cool.
find you. Thank,
Yeah.
thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, this has
I
been
really had
fun.
a
Yeah.
blast. I love you tons, and I can't thank you enough for how many different things that you have opened my eyes to, and I'm thankful every day for those things. And I just wanted to say that to you. So yeah, again, I appreciate you being on. Love your tons,
Thank you.
and we
Yeah.
will definitely talk soon. Okay.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, much love. And I'm excited. I'm excited for how this show has grown and just how it's developed. And this is amazing. It's amazing to be part of this. So
Thank you.
yeah, thank you.